Welcome, children, to the Twilight Mysteries. I am your humble presenter, here to lead you through another terrifying and dark tale. Please, take my hand and join me on this adventure in a small town. You never know what's lurking in those old decrepit cottages. I had just moved into a new place. It was an older building on the outskirts of a small rural town. As a writer, I'd moved out to the countryside to find an idyllic place where I could find my muse. For the first week, it was bliss. The change of scenery had a noticeable impact on my work, and I was finally able to escape the writer's block that had been plaguing me for the past few months. Then I heard the scurrying. The scratching and running all along the ceiling of my small cottage. At first, I thought it was just rats, so I bought a few rat traps and set them up in the ceiling and around the cottage. A few days later, once the scurrying had stopped, I went to check the traps and found something strange. The traps had been set off, but the traps themselves were empty. Small piles of what seemed to be rodent bones lay neatly next to the traps. The very next day, the scurrying started again, mocking me in my feeble attempt to stop it. A few days later, after I'd gotten used to the scurrying, I awoke to a loud crash. Looking around my darkened room, I saw the faint glinting of broken glass. My mirror had shattered. Turning on my lamp, I noticed a single human molar amidst the shards of glass. The incident had me spooked, and needless to say, I didn't fall back asleep that night. About a month later, after the mirror incident had faded from memory and it felt like a distant bad dream, I found a serious water leak and had to call a plumber. He began his work, and after his initial inspection, he informed me that he would need to get into the walls to fix something or other. Suddenly, I heard him shout from the other room. I went to investigate the commotion, expecting to see my kitchen completely flooded. Instead, I saw something sickening. I felt my pulse quicken and my stomach turn. I nearly retched on the spot when I saw that the plumber had stumbled across the skeletal remains of 3 people. I felt an indescribable coldness wash over me as I shakily rushed to get my cell phone. Fumbling for a second, I managed to call the police. The scurrying returned louder than ever before. The sound of scratching was painfully deafening, and we heard something in the ceiling, wailing in anger. The screams sounded distorted, like 1,000 voices crying in pain. The plumber and I bolted to the front door. Just as we crossed the threshold, we heard a loud crack, followed by a crash, turning to find that the ceiling in the living room had collapsed. We stood there, stationary for a second, and when the dust had settled, we saw a horrific monster. Its wailing grew louder, and the sound of it moving was a cacophony of cracks and pops as it turned to face us. Its giant, sinewy tendrils dripped with a viscous mucus, and that hunger burned in its many eyes. It lunged at us, and I felt the blood drain from my face, moving with killing intent. We ran for it, not stopping until we saw the blue lights and heard the police sirens moving towards the house. They rushed past us, going into the hellhole we had just abandoned. We should have tried to stop them. We were both so petrified that all we could think of was escape. I checked into the nearest hotel I could find. My head hitting the pillow, I slept. It was the best night of my life. I was finally safe. The next day, I awoke in my hotel room. A news reporter was discussing the strange disappearance of 2 police officers in our sleepy town, remarking that these kind of things don't happen. Their last known location wasn't given, but I knew. I recognized that they were the 2 officers dispatched to my cottage. A knock on my room door pulled me out of my guilt-ridden stupor. I opened the door to find a small, old man in a neatly fitted 3-piece suit. He tipped his bowler hat and combed his fingers through his hair, handing me his card. It said he was a representative from the Theseus Institute. I ushered the old man in and made the 2 of us some tea. He got straight to business, questioning me about the strange sounds and events that led up to the discovery. It was an odd line of questioning, to say the least. I told him about the scurrying and the mirror incident, and he just smiled and nodded along politely. Finally, he asked me to describe what I had seen. I braced for him to call me crazy as I described the beast, recounting how its form seemed to shift and the horrible sound it made as it pursued us. To my astonishment, he nodded seriously for a second. The barrage of insults I'd anticipated never came. Instead, he put a hand on my shoulder and comfortingly whispered in my ear, "It's over now. You can relax." Sitting back down, he smiled at me and offered to buy the property. I eagerly accepted and shook his hand, not even asking why he would want the place. Sure enough, as soon as he left, I received a notification from my banking app. The price we had agreed on was transferred, in full, from an account simply marked M. Theseus. After that, I left the town and never returned. Wow. You never do know what's lurking in the crawl spaces and attics of those small rural cottages, now do you? Thank you so much for watching.